Hey everyone, it's Horror Free for All, better known as Goosebumps Completionist, and I hope you're doing well today. Today I want to talk about a movie that just released yesterday at the time of me making this video, and just like maybe a little over a month ago I found out even was going to exist, and it's none other than R.L. Stine's Pumpkinhead. Now this is a 2025 film released by Tubi on their free-to-stream platform. It was written and directed by Jim Gerard, and it's based on a short story from R.L. Stine from his the Nightmare Hour short story collection from 1999, which later was turned into an episode adaptation in the Haunting Hour TV show from the Hub Network back in the day. That also spawned an in TV show only sequel in there as well. So, a lot of people know about Pumpkinhead. This is no shock to anyone, especially if you're at all familiar with the Haunting Hour TV show or just R.L. Stine in general. There are people online kind of confusing this with Stan Winston's Pumpkinhead and trying to use that as a metric to bash this movie. That's complete BS, and I don't even want to get into it further than that, but seriously, it's called Google, people. But anyways, when I heard that this movie was coming out, I was extremely excited, and I wanted so badly for this movie to bring back kids horror, because we've had a few years where kids horror has been just in a rough patch. And I'm not saying that this is a complete band-aid, but this does help as some set of a band-aid for all those open wounds I've had with the genre over the years. And I've been strategically thinking in my head like to come back and doing more kids horror reviews, and I think that after watching this movie, I think I'm back in the spirit. I think I finally want to, get the wagon wheels rolling again and talking about kids horror, because this movie left me impressed. It left me impressed. And I will be upfront. I watched the trailer and I knew pretty much upfront that this was going to be a very unfaithful adaptation of the source material. And it had some Dark Harvest by Norman Partridge, or have you seen the movie from David Slade adapting that book, in its veins. It had some Scarecrow Walks at Midnight from Goosebumps in its veins. But I didn't expect it to go full-blown just those things. And I'll get into that near the end of the review. But I will say, if your expectation going into this movie is this is going to be a Pumpkinhead episode just fleshed out into a movie, you're not really going to get that. You're not really going to get that. But what we got, while it's not what I expected nor necessarily wanted, when I heard Pumpkinhead was getting turned into a movie, it still left me quite happy. And out of what I consider the true 4 R.L. Stine movies that have come out now, I think that this is easily the best one. Yes, I think this is better than When Good Ghouls Go Bad. I think it's better than Haunting Hours, Don't Think About It. And I think it's better than Zombie Town. And fun fact, we just got news, like literally, I think last week, that It's the First Day of School Forever, which is a standalone R.L. Stine book, is actually being turned into a movie, I think, next year. So we have a new R.L. Stine cinematic universe, and I think that this movie should be the template for all the other films to copy of how to, I guess, adapt R.L. Stine's works moving forward. Maybe not completely in name only, and maybe you should have some more reverence for the source material, but I digress. So, with that being out the way, let's get into the review. So normally, I guess I'm going to use this review, since I haven't done one in a while, as the new template of how I'm going to do things. I've been going back and forth about like the old style. If you've been following this channel for a long time, back when I was Goosebumps Completionist, especially in the early days, I would keep my reviews very short and sweet. And then over time, I started getting way into specifics and way into the plot and stuff like that. I think I'm going to start dialing back the plot of reviews to be very brief and only give you a brief snippet of what the story is about. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to put more emphasis on the review for you all, because I know that's the main reason why you're here. So, I'm going to try something different, and let's see how it goes moving forward. But I'm going to tell you all the overview about Pumpkinhead's movie in my new style. So, basically, all you need to know is that these two brothers, Sam and Finn, are fishes out of water. They moved from, I guess, a bustling town, and they moved to a small town known as Red Haven. And Red Haven is full of weirdos that perhaps are worshiping the land that belongs to this farmer named Palmer because years ago there was a famine or something, and the farmer turned it around for the town and started providing sustenance and brought the town back to prosperity and made it a lot of money. So now that this town, I guess, is back on the map and these kids have no idea what they've stumbled into, our main character, Sam, which is the younger brother of the two, finds himself in a precarious situation one day when his family decides to partake in the town's festivities. And he meets, I guess, a friend and a girl named Becca, who is the daughter of his next door neighbor, who happens to be the sheriff of the town. And Sam and Becca kind of realize that the farmer's property has a lot more intrigue and mystery to it than there's been led on to be. And through Sam making a decision to steal a pumpkin from the farmer's property, leaves lasting ramifications on his family, particularly with his older brother Finn, who ends up going missing. And for the remainder of the movie, Sam has to team up with his friend Becca, along with a adult character that comes into the fold near the mid portion of the movie, to try to figure out how to save Sam's brother from potential horrifying, I should say, results. And we see some monsters in the mix, like scarecrows coming to life and what have you, and kids being chased and scared, and, you know, basically a huge old plot twist that you expect out of a R.L. Stine story, and a pretty dark and twisted ending that pays homage to the works of R.L. Stine. And I'll just leave it there. So that, in a nutshell, is all you really need to know about Pumpkinhead's movie going forward. If you haven't seen the trailer is a good gauge on what you're going to expect out of this movie. It's actually one of those trailers that basically show you the whole movie up front, which is kind of disappointing. But yeah, do that. Watch the trailer, watch the movie, or even read the short story or watch the classic Haunting Hour episodes. Get the whole take in of the story, okay? So, with that being out the way, let's get into the review. So, I'm going to be upfront. You know, the first barrier to entry for me with this movie was the writer and director, Jim Gerard. I mentioned in the announcement video when the news came out about this movie that the stuff that I saw from this person did not intrigue me. But I actually went and watched a few things from them. And I'm going to be honest, while I didn't really like the stuff I saw from them, I can definitely see that there is some sort of passion for horror. And I have to say, with this movie, I think this is my favorite thing they've released. And it's funny because this director and writer put in some Easter eggs from their former material in this, which I thought was really strange. Particularly with like a scene later on in the movie with like them showing a movie that was clearly made for adults, that involves like drag queen vampires. I was like, really? They're going in universe like that? But I guess that was a Tubi original movie, and I guess since this is a Tubi original movie, I guess we can have a shared universe of things. But yeah, I thought that was quite bizarre. But nonetheless, you know, I will say that if you're apprehensive about somebody adapting R.L. Stine source material here, I will say that this director and writer took the in-name only route with it, which is kind of a bummer for me. But the story we got, it literally felt like Dark Harvest for kids. And I love Dark Harvest's movie from David Slade. I love Norman Partridge's book that the story originated from. This literally felt like that. And it does have the rudimentary sense of the Pumpkinhead short story in its veins. You do get a sense of a kid stealing a pumpkin from a pumpkin patch, them going back to try to return it and finding pumpkin heads, right? That's the general gist of the short story. The episode from the Haunting Hour TV show expanded on it, made it actual monsters coming to life and using more of that, using more of the land to provide scares. The movie didn't quite have it to that level, and if you're expecting that episode to be turned into a movie, you need to set that expectation at the door before you go to watch this thing, because that's not what you're going to get. But I will say the caveat to not having that was the Scarecrow inclusion in here, which begs to the comparison for Dark Harvest that I made, which is basically about a killer scarecrow, Sawtooth Jack, in the movie at least. Here, I call him Sawfoot Mac. But Sawfoot Mac, for a kid's horror villain, he doesn't talk, he doesn't do much, but he's a pretty serviceable antagonist in the story. Along with some other characters that we learn some revelations with, like Farmer Palmer, for examples, pretty much out in the open, like the short story and episode counterpart, to be, I guess, a villain of the story. And we have a recontextualization at the end with a certain character being a villain. And all I'll say is, if you've watched any R.L. Stine movie, I mean any, involving a side character's dad, and I'll leave it there, that trope is full blast here. And honestly, the execution of this twist with this character literally is ripped from Dark Harvest. It's literally ripped from Dark Harvest. It's the same twist, basically. And I was like, really? I mean, it feels like these people wanted to remake the same movie that's already been made instead of, I guess, having reverence for the source material here, and I'll get into that in my negatives with it. But what we got here in execution wasn't too bad, right? With the expectation stuff set aside, I'm going to start talking about some positives I have with the movie. First and foremost, I think that for this film's budget, this was a small-scale production. They didn't have, I guess, the budget enough to do multiple Pumpkinheads. They didn't have enough budget to have a bunch of extras. There's not a lot of that going on here. Even the neighborhood looks kind of cheap, like the old Haunting Hour TV show. I will say that one thing I think this film has going for it is ambiance and atmosphere. There is a rich atmosphere going on with this movie. It feels like fall. It feels like Halloween. It feels like just autumn time. And it has that going for it. And it immediately sucks you in and gets you invested in the movie. R.L. Stine movies, basically, historically, have generally been centered around Halloween. And this is no different. I will say that I do think some other films do it a little bit better. Particularly with, like, When Good Ghouls Go Bad, I think is a little bit better on that front. But this feels like a small rural town. This feels like it's an isolated community. It feels like it's out there in the middle of nowhere. I mean, in this movie, people are using flip phones and, like, house phones from the early 2000s still. So you can clearly tell that they're off the grid. You can clearly tell that they are in the know with, like, smart technology, like most of the teen kids are in the movie. And I thought that was kind of a fun juxtaposition. But yeah, I think the atmosphere and, I guess, the aesthetic of the movie and all of that does remind me of the heyday of kids' horror movies. It really does remind me of that late 90s, early 2000s era of kids' horror movies. Just like how Haunting Hours Don't Think About It reminded me of it in 2007. This feels like that movie too. So I really enjoyed my time when it came to those things. Now, when it comes to the fun stuff with the characters, I'm going to be upfront. Most of the characters in this movie aren't really written that well. Our main character, Sam, he, I guess, has a nice arc, and I do like his arc. But at first, he is annoying, and that is a negative. I'll go in and get that out of the way. Sam is a whiny kid early on, and he is annoying. But as the film goes on, it gets better with this character and becomes more tolerable. I think Finn, for being an older brother character, is pretty well acted. And the way he's handled is pretty admirable. And I like the direction they took with Finn here. They didn't go the whole dickhead older brother or, goody two-shoes older brother character route with him. No, they actually try to make him a sympathetic, character to build on the story with, as you'll see what happens to him in the plot. And it's a very depressing movie when it comes to that, especially by the end, y'all, with these two characters. I mean, it is heart-wrenching. It almost made me shed a tear. And I was not expecting them to go emotionally dark with it, but holy crap. That's one thing that I think most people are going to love about this movie involving Finn and Sam is that ending. Because it hits you. It really does. Wow. But yeah, all the other side characters like Becca's father, the boy's mom, even Farmer Palmer, and this other character. I am blanking on his name, but he is a adult character that helps Becca and Sam in their uh, ill-fated adventure here. All of them I can really care less for. I mean, they're either acted over the top or their characters themselves don't have the best room to, I guess, steal the floor with the material they're given, which pretty much puts all the focus on kid characters, which they immediately should do, right? This is a kid's horror movie. If you're basing it on a kid horror narrative of a short story, you should be doing that. But I will say the adults in this movie are kind of whatever. And aside from that, really, the only other characters you have left is Becca. And without Becca in this movie would be kind of a wasted idea with these characters. Becca easily is the best character of this movie. Not only is she the funniest, not only is she my favorite performed actor in this movie, but she is really the heart and soul. There's so many things with her character that I think are more terrifying than what Sam has to go through involving his family. Like I said, it involves this twist near the back half and some information she knows. And I just like the way the character carries herself. She's smart, she's witty, she knows how to play people, she knows how to convince people to do things for her benefit. And I think easily the funniest attempt at humor in this movie, like I said, comes when her character in Sam, I didn't touch on this in the Potter review because, like I said, I'm trying to be brief with it, but there's a scene where they have to leave Becca's, house so they can go do what they need to do at Farmer Palmer's. And she convinces these two kids to take the whole bucket of candy and trade costumes. It was so funny the way that was executed. I literally laughed my ass off. It was hilarious. And that gag literally ran for the rest of the movie. And it was awesome. It was an awesome little gag. And I tip my hat to the writers there for that. But yeah, Becca, easily the best character in this movie. And one of my favorite parts about it. Now, moving from that, my other positives kind of stem down to the serious tone that this movie imbues. I'm going to be upfront. My biggest worry outside of this being kind of like a iffy adaptation from a director that has iffy material, I will say that the tone here matches the old Haunting Hour TV show to a T. Taking the source material seriously, putting horror in the forefront for kids. Remember, this is a movie made for kids. This is not made for adults. And it feels like the old Haunting Hour show. It really does, and I really love that about it. It didn't put too many kiddie gloves on. It didn't nerf the source material too hard. It kept the horror at the forefront. Which brings me to Sawfoot Mac, which is basically Sawtooth Jack from Dark Harvest. He's a pretty good scarecrow villain. I mean, he is pretty intimidating. He walks around like the skin crawler animatronic from Spirit Halloween, or if you've seen Spirit Halloween the movie, he has the same like presence to him, right? He should be the nightmare fuel, right? What ends up being revealed about the Scarecrow, I think, is also pretty cool. He's like this like living embodiment of this town's curse or something. And what he does to people, I guess, for kids' horror standards, is pretty frightening, involving like him sucking the soul essence from people. That is an ability, and him having these like razor sharp claws and toes that can cut you. It's pretty cool. So yeah, there is some CGI reliance there with his character. And I would say most of the scenes with him are actually pretty much full on CGI, maybe with a practical effect being like the blueprint. But yeah, it surprisingly wasn't bad when it came to that. And I guess the last positive, like I already hinted at the ending being incredible, but I literally have to stress this. The ending is one of the best kids' horror endings of all time, in my opinion. It really did save this movie in a lot of ways for me, because I do have a lot of problems with it. But the ending makes this story so much better. It really does. And I love the sequel bait there if they want to expand onto it. I love that it went for a dark ending like an R.L. Stine story usually goes. And I can appreciate that. I really can. I really can. So yeah, I have a lot of positives, but I do have some negatives. Y'all, and I'm going to be upfront. The first One, I've already kind of touched on this. The characters aren't really that good. Sam is really annoying early on. And really, this movie should be broken down into perfect sections because this is an exactly 90-minute movie. The first 30 minutes, the middle 30 minutes, and the final 30 minutes. Each have their varying degrees of character annoyances. For the first 30 minutes, Sam is easily the most annoying character. The second 30 minutes, it's this adult character in this really prolonged, dragged out skit scene involving Farmer Palmer being prank called by this old gentleman as a distraction. It went on way too long. The jokes were not funny, and it was absolute cringe, and they got annoying. They got super annoying in that middle stretch. And then in the final 30 minutes, I want to say the characters were annoying per se, but I will say there are some things that come to light about some characters that I wish were expounded on better, because the movie spent a lot of its time, now we're getting to another negative, in the story just meandering. Look, I expected a short story being turned into a film to have its dragging moments, for it to being turning its wheels at times so it can prolong runtime. But holy mother of God, this movie felt like nothing was happening. You have literally a pretty decent opening scene to start you off with the movie. But once the family moves to Red Haven, it just becomes boring. It is a boring movie for like the first 50 minutes. And I can't tell you why it's so boring. Yes, we have to go through the whole expository thing, setting up the sibling relationship, setting up them being the new people in town, setting up this mystery that this town is obsessed with this farmer's land, setting up that this town loves Halloween festivities, possibly worshiping the land like a cult. All this stuff. Him finding this pumpkin, this weird pumpkin that grows isolated in the middle of this farm that might have some supernatural connotations. All this stuff. It feels like the movie takes a scene that should last maybe a minute or two and stretches the scene out to 5 to 6 minutes. And at first, you don't really notice it. And like the first 30 minutes, there is some expository things there, so I can let it slide. But that middle 30 minutes, oh my God, they drag so hard. They're dragging their feet to make this an hour and a half. I'm like, they did not need to do this. They did not need to make this story a movie. There wasn't enough there. Obviously, they either didn't have the budget to expand the story out further to make it more cinematic, or maybe, just maybe, they knew up front that they weren't going to be allowed to do the things that possibly people wanted out of this movie. So they just said, let's take this scene and let's see how far we can make it. And I'm specifically talking about the Farmer Palmer prank calling scene. There's some stuff intertwined in there with like Becca and Sam going to spy inside of Palmer's house, which is fine. But the other stuff, that's like, I literally counted how many minutes the prank call stuff took up of the movie. And it was 14 minutes. 14 minutes. In the middle of a movie. Come on now. Cut the crap. I mean, this movie had a slog pace to it. The final 30 minutes, thankfully, picks up the steam. But yeah, the pace of this movie can be pretty bad at times. The filler is highly noticeable there too. Now, when it comes to the story, this might be the most frustrating thing. Like I said, this is like an in-name only adaptation of the source material. And, given that, I figured that maybe they were going to incorporate the Pumpkinheads in a different way to kind of make the story stand out. No, this stuff felt shoehorned in because majority of this story is about this farmer guy who possibly has this book that conjured up some sort of curse to allow the town to become fruitful and prosperous and make money again, make everybody happy. And there's people that worship the land, and you, I guess, find out why, because there's a certain element with food from the land that gets revealed in there. But when it comes to other explanations of things, like later on, there's an explanation of where the book was found to begin with. And literally, the character that was revealed to have originated the book said, they just found it. Okay. When it comes to the curse, nothing, and I mean nothing, is expounded on further than it just being a thing. You're like, okay, the Scarecrow comes to life. What role does the Scarecrow have in any of this? Why does the Scarecrow need to exist in a story that's adapting Pumpkinhead? Why is this here, right? Why do we only have one pumpkin-headed individual? What happens to all the other pumpkin-headed individuals? What it becomes of this? Nothing. Nothing is expounded on because literally they are trying to, I guess, have a climactic finale for everyone, which is appreciated, and to make it more perilous for the characters that we've gotten to know. But in terms of like understanding what is going on, and not to mention, there's some lore, a lot of inconsistencies when it comes to the side effects of this town's curse. One in particular is this memory loss aspect, where if a kid before their 18th birthday gets taken by the farm, turned into a pumpkinhead, right? Mild spoiler there, but that's to be expected if you heard about the Pumpkinhead story. Then the parents who eat the food of the land supposedly forget about their kids. However, at one point of the story, it's clearly mentioned that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because if you're a kid and you witness this stuff, once you turn 18, the memories go away. So how does that happen? Don't they have to eat the food? What are they going to do? Starve themselves the whole time? And better yet, there's a character in the movie that we meet. There's a certain revelation about them and a potential sibling that got turned into a pumpkinhead years before. They were a kid, and they turned 18 and they did not lose their memory of their sibling. That's how hilariously inconsistent this lore stuff is in this movie. It's so sloppy, nothing makes sense. Even the twist. Now, the twist you're going to see in this movie involving a certain character, if you've seen Dark Harvest movie, you're going to see this coming a mile away. Or if you're familiar with R.L. Stine tropes, you're going to see this coming from a mile away. And I can understand the motives. I can understand all of that. But even that has a lot of question marks because that person was said to be more involved in said character I just mentioned's sibling becoming a pumpkinhead. And there's some context with Farmer Palmer in that makes you think, well, what was Farmer Palmer really doing then? I mean, and especially after you see a certain thing happen in the story where Farmer Palmer kind of snaps out of it a little bit. You see this regret in what he had done. Like, the story does not do its best job to carry that narrative, right? It doesn't do a good job at making all that stuff clear. When you have to think this hard about this stuff, you know it was poorly executed. And that's where I'm going to leave it there. The story left a lot to be desired. I'm going to mention the music. The music is pretty badly placed in this movie. You have really loud jump cut music scare crap going on. You have some inappropriately placed comedic music as well that just isn't good. Nothing more to say there. Just the music was kind of bad. And to be honest, I'm speaking from a fan's point of view here. I'm just going to speak my honest truth. As a fan of Pumpkinhead, the short story and the episode, I really wanted more Pumpkinhead in a movie that's adapting Pumpkinhead. Look, I can appreciate the approach of going in name only. But at the very least, you should incorporate the Pumpkinheads into the story. When I say that the Pumpkinhead element in this movie feels shoehorned in, I really mean it. This should have just been a movie about a scarecrow curse, cursed plants, cursed veggies turning people into cult members, people forgetting that kids exist because there needs to be a sacrifice from the scarecrow. That's all this movie needed to be. But why did they have to associate it with Pumpkinhead? Literally, the afterthought of this story is the pumpkin inside, not to mention the Pumpkinomicon book thing that conjures all this crap. That's a whole big old doozy, but it's kind of cool in the aesthetic. I do kind of like it. Why is it just one pumpkin? Why not have multiple Pumpkinheads? Why not have an army of Pumpkinheads be the villain of the story? Why do we have a scarecrow as the villain? It makes no sense to me. What were they thinking here? I really just, I don't understand how they fumbled that part of the story. So, when it comes to, I guess, my final thoughts of this film here, despite those negatives I had, despite the negatives, I will say it's well made, it's well shot. The acting performances are fine. I mean, they're not the greatest characters ever, not the greatest performances ever, but it's watchable. It has a gloomy atmosphere, a serious tone, a heartfelt conclusion that's kind of sad and dark, and one for the history books here. But I would say it's a memorable movie. And I'm glad that we have a fourth official R.L. Stine movie currently out there in the ether. If I see a bootleg for this out there, I'll probably buy it on physical. I'm hoping Tubi might entertain making a physical release officially for this, but if they don't, I don't blame them because of the cost and all that, and losing money on physical media these days is terrible. But like I said, if I see a bootleg of this, I'll probably buy it for my collection because I have all the other three movies of the R.L. Stine universe already, so I want this one. But in terms of this, like living up to the expectations or the legacy of R.L. Stine's short story or the former Haunting Hour episode for that matter, I don't think it comes close to those in my opinion, but it is a solid movie still. Like, I'm glad that kids horror is returning to form with stuff like this. I would rather stuff like this come out than Goosebumps 2015 or Goosebumps 2023. This should be the template because this was good. This was genuinely good. And that without that ending, I would probably be harsher on it. But because the ending was so good, I decided on a pretty fair score for this. With those problems in mind, I decided to deduct 1.1 points off the top, and I gave this a 3.9 out of 5 stars, which is a C+. This is the highest rated kids horror movie I've given out in recent time. Because a lot of them just kind of land in that 3.2 to 3.6. It's like meh, okay, or slightly decent, maybe average at best stuff. But this was good. This was good. Not without its problems. And I think, like I said, the ending really does help it. Without the ending, it probably would be just like barely a notch above When Good Ghouls Go Bad. But because the ending was so good, I put it there. If you want to know my current ranking and standings while we're here of all of the R.L. Stine standalone movies released so far that I consider in this category, I would probably put Zombie Town in last. Then a slight step up from that would be Haunting Hours Don't Think About It. Then it would be When Good Ghouls Go Bad, a little bit above that. And then with a considerable step up, it would be Pumpkinhead. So yeah, I mean, go check this movie out if you haven't seen it yet. Especially for this year, since it's around Halloween. Get your Halloween fix in with this movie. If you don't like it as much, you can always go to the original Haunting Hour show and watch that. Matter of fact, along with this drop, they finally, and I mean finally, have brought Nightmare Room in HD to streaming on Tubi, which makes me think that this might be another video topic in the future, that maybe Nightmare Room can be incorporated into Haunting Hour in some way on Tubi. And we'll talk about that shortly, but I'm excited. The world of R.L. Stine is hitting a renaissance, especially in film. And yeah, go check this movie out. Go show R.L. Stine some support. And hopefully this movie performs well. We can keep getting more. So yeah, that's my thoughts on R.L. Stine's Pumpkinhead from 2025. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this movie before. Did you love it? Did you hate it? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.